So like I said, I want it to feel like our normal casual conversations and not feel so rigid because we ain't like that with each other.
Ever.
Right. I want that to translate through the videos. So I guess we could start here. Like every time I think about you, even though you're my sister friend,
Yes.
there's a part like I compartmentalize a part of you where I'm like, you are that like I'm gonna say shit. You are that bitch. Like you are such a boss. Like anybody who knows you, like, oh, Krystal, yeah, like it's just the way people light up every time they say your name and what they associate with you. Like your reputation often precedes like you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to like lift that up. And there are some other things I definitely want to lift in this
Yeah.
conversation. I know I might cry and I'm gonna try my hardest to keep it
Shanice, I
together.
appreciate it. I need to hear what just came out of your mouth too, because experiencing the traumatic push out that I did
Mm,
professionally in that one chapter of my life, really warped my sense of social perception because I
mhm.
didn't know who to trust anymore.
Whew.
Same way. So, I didn't know, I'm like, I don't know what people think of me. I don't know anything. So to this day, when people tell me stuff, I'm like, yep, sit with it, internalize it, believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're definitely gonna get into that. But what you just said resonates with me, especially right now in this season. Like, we have our own self perception, right? But we don't know what it's like on other folks receiving in, like how they perceive us.
Yep.
I don't want to like project my own experience onto you, but I know for me, like I've struggled throughout my life for like my own self esteem and
Mhm.
developing like a healthy self-perception. Like I
Yep.
feel like I'm newly arrival to this place where I'm like, oh girl, you the ish. Like and like affirm
Yeah.
myself all the time. But
Yeah.
when I made the official announcement that I'm launching my own business and like the love that came my way, like people who I like known and met over the years, like I didn't even know like that would have been, their reaction to that, right? Like the sharing of my posts, which went unsolicited, the comments, people directly messaging me, like I said,
Yeah.
like we had like a touch and go relationship, but I didn't think like people would receive it that way. So
Mhm.
to
Yep.
like, even read their affirmations, like, oh, this is totally you, and I love what
Yeah.
you stand for, and I love to see. I'm like, I didn't even know y'all like looked at me like that.
Yes.
So I can
That part.
understand what you're saying. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Because we are just living in this human body, existing as Black women who just want to be free and maintain our freedom and
mhm,
just be good in interaction with other people, and you take for granted sometimes the impact you can have on other people's lives, how you're touching them, because it's just so normal. It's just your day to day. You know what I mean? Um, yeah.
yeah, so like I said, before we get into that very defining and pivotal moment for you in your career, like what is your earliest memory of when you knew like I'm a leader or like that meant something?
Yeah. My earliest memory would actually have to be elementary school
Hmm.
days of pretending to my stuffed animals and to my little brother, who was 2 years younger than me, and
Hmm.
also to our pet dog that I was their teacher. I would line them up in a row. Of course, the puppy would get up and move. My brother, I'm like, don't move, sit right there. And I would give them coloring books and stuff.
Yeah.
And I would pretend to be a teacher.
Hmm.
Like I always wanted to be a teacher. And I actually realized at a young age that the person in the profile outside of my Black grandmother, who is an amazing giant to me,
Hmm.
the profile that I attracted to most was that of my Black women teachers in school.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there was just something about the way they walked, the way they talked. growing up in rural Alabama and Selma in particular, so many of them were also from Selma. They had gone off to college. The predominant amount of them had gone to Tuskegee, Alabama State, like several different HBCUs, and they actively taught us racial pride before I even had language to know that that was what was being instilled in me. And so I just knew that I wanted to be them.
Yeah.
Like everything that that meant. So I was introduced to like the concept of sororities and fraternities younger, right? Because some of them were Greek, some of them were not. But I definitely knew like, okay, Miss Parker is a Delta. Okay, Miss So-and-so is the AKA. There was just something about Black magic in general that attracted me to them. And when I recognized that, like, that's what I want to be, I began to emulate that everywhere I went. Whether it was like a Girl Scout troop, whether it was church and being on the junior usher board or the choir or whatever, I'm like, teachers, they like motivate people. They get the group together. They do whatever. And that's who I was in every space as a child.
Got you. Yeah, it's funny. Like, soon as you started talking about the Black women, you didn't see how you like propped yourself up. Like, it was these Black women I grew like you was tipping up because you straight out of Texas this weekend. But when you mentioned Black women, you like your whole posture changed. Yeah. So you mentioned your grandmother, and she was this powerhouse. Like, how specifically did she stoke your fire? Like, how did she nurture, like, this is what I want to become? Was there any mantra or anything she fed to you coming up?
Yeah. So my grandmother grew up in an incredible amount of financial poverty. Grew up walking to school on dirt roads, with shoes, without shoes. Really like ended up taking care of her siblings at a very young age. She was not afforded the opportunity to go to college. But she was always a hard worker. Like, she took care of everybody and the whole family and her parents. And growing up watching her meant that I understood firsthand what servant leadership was, because that's who she was. Like, she served, and that was the way that she led. And I saw her in leadership positions in the church and in our neighborhood. In terms of holidays, and knowing that there were certain houses in proximity to ours where people didn't, they have food, and she cooked like extra food, and she would make these to-go plates, and I would walk with her down the road to like give the to-go plate to this person and that person. And so I just like, she socialized and conditioned me to service. And she also was just unapologetically who she was and her values. So she showed me what it meant to understand who you are and to just sit in that, to reside in it, right? Even if you had to be by yourself. Because she was that woman, like, if she said she didn't do something, she didn't do it. You weren't going to sway her. You weren't going to talk her out of it, and I just admired her bravery, and so, yeah, I took a lot from her. And I always tell people that if I am half the woman she is, I have done something in my lifetime, because I respect her just that much.
Yeah. Man, our elders, like, hearing you talk about your grandmother, it just reminded me like of my grandfather. Celebrated his heavenly birthday last Monday, and like, I remember growing up and watching like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune with him and my grandma.
Yeah.
And especially like Jeopardy. I know I didn't know those answers, but he will always look at he called me Muda. I don't know how he came up with that nickname. Them country folks.
Don't they come up with names?
And he Geechee, he from South Carolina. Like, okay. So he was like, Muda, I know you know the answer. And I know I don't, but just that like nudge, I'm like, yeah, I can answer this question. So he like nurtured this idea, like, you're smart, you're brilliant, like you could figure it out. And like, I still like get emotional to
Mhm.
this day. Like I didn't know it was this big deal when I was younger. Like, you know, those bumper stickers you get when you're an honor roll student and it
That
says
part.
my child is an honor roll student. So
Uh-huh.
my parents, they ain't put it on their card. They're like, we about to chip our pay. But my granddaddy, he had two of them on that Lincoln. And I just remember that like sense of pride I had, that he had pride in like my accomplishment of making
Yeah.
honor roll, right? So it's something about though that's that gentle touch of the elder like nurtured us along the way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I know like for a long time, like I remember at 8 years old saying like, I'm gonna be like Thurgood Marshall, I'm gonna go to Harvard, I'm gonna go to law school, I'm gonna become a Supreme Court justice, not
Mhm.
even fully understanding what that means, but
Yeah.
I just knew that was my trajectory at the time. And I
Yeah.
had that confidence, but somewhere down the road, that
Yeah.
confidence was broken. And
Yes.
I questioned my intelligence. I questioned
Mhm.
my worth. And I
Yeah.
just started second guessing everything that I did. And it sounded like you had a defining moment like that where you mentioned it like you grew up with these
Mhm.
strong, influential Black women who carried themselves like not just, you know, strong Black women, but like chiefs of the village,
Yeah.
right? Like carrying that torch and them, you know, reaching you and teaching you and instilling that value of like, I am magical, I am powerful. And with that comes this
Yeah.
responsibility to lead within my community. But then somewhere down the road, like somebody broke. Well, I ain't gonna say broke it. They bent it to the point where we almost broke. So, like, can you walk us, like me, or us through that moment, like what happened and how did it shape the foundation that you were
Yeah.
moving in?
Yeah. That's so good. It's so interesting. There are about four messages that I think I needed to hear growing up that weren't even honestly consistently affirmed by my own parents. Sometimes they were affirmed by my grandparents. Sometimes they were affirmed by a Black woman teacher, an educator. One is that I see you.
Mm-hmm.
One is that I hear you. um, I believe you,
Mm-hmm.
and that you are enough. You're beautiful, you're smart, you have what it takes. And I think that interestingly enough, those Black women, whether it was like my mom affirming a message, or whether it was my grandma or those teachers over time, um, those things were shaken for me as I began to navigate spaces over time that did not look like my home environment.
Mm-hmm.
My home environment was all Black. My home environment was rural. It was Southern. You know, it was very communal.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something that was so innocent that was also stripped from me and making the transition to different contexts. I think there was this belief that as Black people, you were supposed to take care of one another.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught that. Like it's like you're supposed to look out for one another. That's like common sense. You're supposed to help one another. And these things, then I remember fast forwarding going to a college preparatory boarding school for my junior and senior year of high school. I remember going to undergraduate studies at the University of Notre Dame, being a predominantly white institution. I remember getting into job spaces and environments, including the profession of teaching in a traditional public school district, um, joining professional organizations like Teach for America, joining professional spaces for conferences, all types of things, you name it. In every space that I came in, I felt like one of those core messages from my childhood was questioned,
Mm-hmm.
it was silenced, it was punished, it was it made others feel intimidated and therefore threatened. It's
Yeah.
like, who are you to be
Yeah.
Black?
Yeah.
Feel that you are enough. Who are you to be Black? Feel that you have a voice and you're making your voice be known. right? Who are you to be Black and making yourself seen in this space? And so in so many ways, I feel like the way that I showed up in the world always pushed against white comfort,
Yeah.
and always pushed against this notion of like the audacity of Blackness, right? And so I
Just
found
barely
myself,
exist.
yeah, that's it.
That's
And
just
I constantly, yeah, I constantly found myself um going through this internal and external struggle to stay true to myself and determine what authenticity was and looked like and how to embody that, and balancing trying to navigate what ultimately to me turned out to be a definition of success that was more aligned to proximity to whiteness than it was about my Black liberation. And it wasn't until I got to a point of realizing that everything that you have aspired towards, you don't need that. And you don't need the validation of those things to be great. When that started clicking for me, when I
How
started
did it click?
redefining, yeah, well, one was being traumatically let go of a position that I gave my whole time, effort, psychological commitment, emotional commitment, all of that too, which was my principalship. I poured my entire self, even oftentimes over my relationship with my spouse, putting my schoolwork first, putting my marriage second, in the early days of like my very first year of being married, and then before that engaged, to turn a space that was in a lot of ways thrown away into a space that children and staff felt some type of normalcy and felt some type of safety, not just physical safety, but like emotional and psychological safety. And in the process of that school leadership journey, I learned a lot. There were some practices that I embodied that I know my ancestors would be proud of. Conversely, there are
Like what?
practices. What'd you say?
I said, like, what was something specific? You like,
Um, so
this one is for the ancestors.
yeah, really promoting social justice education
Yeah.
to elementary school students, actively creating spaces where we could talk about race, creating spaces before it was sexy and trendy to do so, creating spaces where we could, take physical trips to historic spots like Birmingham and Selma, giving kids in elementary school the opportunity to meet one of our greatest giants, Congressman John Lewis. Like when he died, my mind went immediately to kids at the school who had the opportunity to meet him, and the fact that I got some text messages from them being like, Miss Hardy, which was my name, at that time, like, I remember when you took us to Selma, we met him. And that, oh boy, that is like a feeling that is, you can't even fully put into words. And when Mike Brown was murdered, allowing an opportunity for children to go to Ferguson, to meet his parents, to go to his elementary school, to interview community leaders, like there's something about giving kids opportunity to take learning and put it into real action and application that is beyond just textbook regurgitation of information, right? But it's like with this education, how are you going to advance the world to be a better place for our community and for this country as a whole? And so those are things that I felt like would have definitely made our ancestors proud. And yet at the same time, there were some practices that I modeled that were not okay under the auspice of me trying to like meet certain targets. And like, if I don't do this, the school's gonna close down, da da da. Those are like policy constraints that have implications for practices that roll out, So my very first year, trying to take, for instance, a 55% out of school suspension rate, which is what it was before I got there, down meant that I had to be like demanding, and I had to be like zero tolerance in the way that we talk about today. And that didn't at times consistently feel good. And yet at the same time, I knew like what's not going to happen is that a second grader is going to be cussing the teacher out and putting his hands on teachers. That's not okay. Right. And so stabilizing an environment that was very chaotic required of me practices at times that like I wasn't committed to keeping up because I felt in a lot of ways like they were no longer needed, honestly. But I say all that to say that a lot of work got poured into that environment. And at the same time, it was very traumatizing to be for a little Black girl, a Black hero, and then behind closed doors be punished for the same things that publicly I'm being praised for, right? And so that entire experience culminated in me being let go of my position in the midst of a 15 to 20-minute conversation in the middle of a school day, being escorted out by an officer, like as if I were a child molester, to children that I poured my entire everything to, right? And so that experience broke me not only psychologically, but emotionally. There are a lot of things that I went through in terms of feeling anxiety, depression, frustration, embarrassment, shame, lots of stuff where I said like, oh my God, am I adequate? Am I this? Am I that? And I had to really realize that institutional racism, and interpersonal racism and all the other forms of racial, oppression and injustice can take a heavy toll on you, right? Because here I am trying to take ownership of something that was outside of my control that happened to me. And yet my aggressors are going on with their life. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, God brings things full circle and they got theirs and more, like more, to the point that I know that for not only white folks, but also for the few people of color who are also involved in that, every time they see me, my sister, every time they see me, I'm a walking reminder of what they did, right? And how you have to be very, not only careful of how you treat people, but a walking reminder that,
you don't have the last word.
Yeah. And that like, you really can't stop something that is greater than yourself. Because if anything, that traumatic experience, which was a part of my breaking. So it's like I had to break to rebuild, to recognize it like, no, you're still you, but what you were aspiring towards, you got to recalibrate, sis, what success actually means. And I had to make an internal decision, Shanice, to say, I no longer want to ask to be seen. I no longer want to seek validation in this way. I no longer want to ascribe for you to give me a seat at your table. I'm going to create my own table. I'm going to create opportunities for my people. I'm going to like do it. Whatever the it is in my heart, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it my own way. And I'm going to do it my own Black way. And I'm still going to make it. And so I think that when I talk about that being that walking reminder, I know without a shadow of a doubt that for some people, I am a walking, talking like symbol of Black resilience.
Which is a threat.
It is a big threat because it's like, why won't you just stop? Like it keeps going, and it's like it's gonna keep on going because this is not me. It's not even about me. It's about us as a people. This is who we are. Who we are.
It's a part of our lineage and our bloodline. Like, even though you are, like you say, you were broken in order to have like this rebirth, this great awakening to yourself, right? But do those ghosts of the past, meaning like those voices and those negative thoughts that you did internalize, do they come back and resurface? And when they do, like, what do you do as a practice to come?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that healing is not a one and done like action item. I think healing is a process.
People in the back.
I think healing is a process, it's ongoing, and I am ever yet in full healing, from that. I think that the progress that I've seen over time has been vast, and at this particular moment, the tendency to want approval, the tendency to want to be seen by a particular person or validated by a particular organization and stuff, like that's still there. It doesn't like get just thrown away or disappear, but it is about the inner talk that I have with myself and the ability to create counter narratives, and surround myself in an entire ecosystem of messaging that affirms that you don't need that this is who you are, that, let me remind you of what God can do, right? That like, there's a level of affirmation that happens and that keeps me grounded to not act on those thoughts that come in a negative way of sinking back down to that place, right? And I think part of it is like, when you have a really good dish, it's hard to go back to something that just tastes nasty, and like the liberation,
I know it's
right? It's like, it's work, but who, baby,
you have a taste of it. It's like you understand
it's hard to go back.
Why, like Malcolm X said something audaciously, by any means necessary, right? Like, and how I apply that to my life now, like I've had my struggles with mental illness, with depression and anxiety. And I had a moment like prior to me coming to, the school where you were the principal, like I had a very tough time and I hit a rock bottom and I don't like to say suicidal, but I did come to a point where I'm like, I don't even want to be a part of this anymore. And I really almost leaned completely into that thought. And that defining moment where God was like, it is either or, but if you choose give life another chance, I'm gonna show you a way through this. And when I came out of depression and I felt joy like I had never experienced before, I was like, oh, I'm never going back there. And I'm gonna do whatever it takes for me not to have this, have that darkness, that heaviness anymore. And now, like being in this I call it my second great awakening, because that was my first. My second now is like, launching my own business and the freedom that comes along with it. I was telling my therapist, I was like, I literally don't see anything else but this. Once you get it, it's literally like crack. Even though when you say crack is whack, it's like, girl, I am not letting this go for nobody.
You transcend, right? Like I think because I grew up in some ways under this like people pleasing notion too, that carried into my adulthood, and it took me many years to get free from that, and I realized that like the residue of that is wanting the approval of let's say a person. I got to a point right now in particular where I realized like, for what? What do you need that for? You don't. And when I recognize that, like, hell, that person wishes they were you. If you want to get down to all of the dots around things, like titles mean nothing, okay? When people want to talk about influence and impact, you can have that without a title, right? I'm like, you have a title, but you have no influence. People don't respect you. I'm not in a formal org in this way, but when I open my mouth, I try to positively impact people so they will listen, right? And have their respect. I think about dollar amounts, and people, are overly concerned about that. And I realized one day, I'm like, I make more than that joker, and that joker too, times 2, times 3. And then when I started having those moments, I was like, Girl, you ain't missing nothing.
Adam.
You don't need nothing from people.
Right? Like, ooh, I
Like
make
you don't need,
less than
and
a
they
quarter.
can't control you. And I think that's the other thing when it comes to people. When you realize that when people also realize that they have no control over you, that's when you become a threat.
Oh yeah.
Because as long as I can dangle something over you,
Yeah.
you owe me a favor or whatever, it's like, man, but that's why God's story, divine timing and divine orchestration is so beautiful because there is no person that can put their hand on that to say like, oh, I made you. No, God did that. Do you know what I'm saying?
The Ike Turner syndrome, like I gave you your name, I made you who you are. And have you seen that documentary? How sis came back?
Oh, my girlfriend told me.
Oh my God.
ASAP. I was like, okay.
Brilliantly done. I highly suggest you watch it. Like I know at first when I heard they were doing it, I'm like, why? We have a whole, biopic, biopic of her. I'm like, what new are we gonna learn? But I realized in the movie they don't talk about her comeback as like her redefining who she is for herself and how this woman did a venue with over 180,000 people in the venue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's crazy. But I know we're like at time. So there's two things. I'm gonna try to make it real quick. So as you know, like I named Blackbyrd Initiative after Nina Simone's song Blackbird. And in her chorus, she says, why you want to fly Blackbird. But the context in which she uses that is like she's speaking of like, that dark cloud we talk about, right? Where Black folks specifically, like they want to soar, they want to be liberated, but it's like, why even dream about it? Because we're never going to have it. Like, look what's all in place to prevent us from having freedom. So why you want to fly? But I want to remix that and saying like, why do you want to like, what is at stake when it comes to your liberation, right? Like, why do you want to fly? Why do you want to be free? Why is it necessary for you to be free in this world? So I just want to leave that question with you.
Yeah. For me, it's necessary for me to be free in this world because my family's liberation is entwined with my own. My parents are nearly 60 years old, and my ability to flourish and thrive, having taken the courage to bet on myself and founding a venture, is going to open the door for them to be homeowners. My ability to be who I am is freeing my two younger brothers to be their full authentic self in this world, and I see the impact that it has on other men in my life, such as my husband. I see just the potential it will have on my future unborn children. Like I am at a point in my life and in my service in which I'm ready to begin my own family. And I look forward to being a mother that my Black children can look to and just be like so affirmed and proud of, like I can only imagine, and I'm gonna be a huge Beyonce fan. I can only imagine as Blue Ivy ages what it means to look to Beyonce as her mother. Not the superstar that we know, but like that's my mom. Because you can see Beyonce's evolution over time as a Black woman.
Listen.
And I'm like, I can just only imagine the mothering implications that it has for her, raising Black children at this moment in time.
Yeah. I mean, her whole evolution is like a whole nother discussion because I took time to reflect on that too. And I relate to, even though we don't know all the details, but you see the distinct difference of her coming up, as a teen in Destiny's Child, even early in her solo career, but when she broke ties, like as far as management with her father, and like totally took over her image and what she wanted for her career. It like changed her whole pathway. But I just want to leave you with this, even though I'm going to write more in detail in the story. I have to let you know like what it meant for me for divine order for us to cross paths. Because like what you said earlier, like what your elders did for you and saying like, you know, I see you, I hear you, I believe you, and you're worthy. Because early on in my career, I felt like, and let me just be clear, I was not perfect. I was young in my professional career, developing like anyone else, but I felt like I was punished for being Black.
Yep.
That's it. And being a force and being something that people wish they had. And they thought just because I was this young girl that they were going to mold me and pull my puppet strings and put me into the box that they constructed because they didn't have the magic to move things in the way that I could. So they thought that they can control it. And when they couldn't, they used every opportunity there was to try to diminish my character and my professionalism and question my intentions as a professional and made me feel like I was the problem. I was the problem, even though there were things that predated me. But when we met and just in our conversation, that's how I felt. I felt seen for the first time in my professional career, and I felt heard, and I felt believed, and I felt worthy. And how I flourished at your school, it literally was a part of saving my life, because right before I came was when I reached that low point in my life where I wanted to give up, because they really made me feel like I had no place in this world, and I allowed that to happen. So I just want to say, like, thank you so much. And this is why we need each other, and we need these spaces for us, right? Because I tell anybody, like, nothing hits like a Black woman, right? I mean, I'm metaphorically speaking.
Nothing. Oh my God. Whew.
Thank you.
I thank you for everything that you just poured out, you know, because I can completely relate, you know, of experiencing that in so many ways, shapes, and forms, right? And it is the only reason why that disposition to receive you was there. Because had I not gone through the BS myself, I wouldn't be cognizant or discerning, you know, of how to be there, you know, for someone else. And I don't even, it's so interesting. It goes back to a quote from Dr. Maya Angelou, and I speak this all the time. Like, people may forget what you say, because I don't even know what I would have said to you, right? Like, in trying to recount the words. She says, it's not what people say, it's not what they do, but people will never ever forget. Like, people may forget what you say, they may forget what you do, but people will never ever forget the way you make them feel. And what is apparent to me is the way you were made to be, like, made to feel, you know. And I appreciate hearing it. You know, it's so helpful to know that and to understand, like, the power of that, you know, so we can continue to be that and be mindful of that even now, today, you know, for people that we engage with. You are so brave. You're so dope. You're so
Thank you.
amazing. Like, you really are. We talk about this tagline on the shirt that, like, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and, like, you are, like, ancestors as in your bloodline on your mama's side, your bloodline on your daddy's side, ancestors in terms of just our Black lineage in general, you know. Shanice, you are here at the right time, doing the right work for the right people, and will have the right amount of impact. Trust it. Don't give up.
Don't get me to crying again.
Yes,
You know, I am not gonna apologize.
That's all I got. That's all I got for today.
Oh, it's cool. I'm learning not to apologize for my tears, especially going into this first. I hear this session about breaking the whole Black Superwoman complex. So no, I'm gonna let these tears flow, and I might post the video on IG too.
Listen, it's powerful. I'm here for it. I love you. I appreciate you. I feel honored to be in your space.